see here. Which side is it? Can you tuck just a tiny bit? And then a little bit on the other side, and you'll be really good there. Okay. Yes. Sorry, as you moved, it moved a little bit. Okay. Can you tell us where you were born?
Do you want an elaboration? I was born in a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania, Wyoming, Pennsylvania. It's an anthracite coal mining area. So my grandparents came to this country to work in the coal mines in Pennsylvania.
Very cool. Do you and Ben, as I ask the questions, if since you're editing it, if you want him to elaborate, just
he's doing great. You're doing a great job.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have a brother and a sister, both of who actually stayed in Wyoming Valley, Pennsylvania. My sister was a nurse. My brother ended up being the local dentist in the town. And I was the one that actually packed up my bag and moved away.
Awesome. What made you pack up your bag and move away?
Well, I had, the opportunity to go away to school, which was, my brother and I were the first generation in our family that went to college. And my brother stayed in the hometown. And I actually was recruited, believe it or not, to play football, which I didn't do very well. But I did get me into college. And I moved out of the hometown. And as a good education will do, it expands your world, not unlike PBS. Kind of opens your eyes to opportunities and new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things.
Fantastic. What did your parents do for a living?
Yeah, my parents were, both working class folks. My dad was a welder in a factory and actually went to work in the factory during the war to help kind of build the airplane wings and weld airplane wings, I guess, onto airplanes that ended up in the war effort. And my mom was a nurse who worked for, probably 50 or 60 years of her life in that capacity.
Fantastic. What were your parents' expectations of you growing up?
My parents were always just very supportive. The only expectations I think they have for my brother and I and my sister was, to be good people, to be as good as you can be in whatever you chose. So there was never any pressure for any one of us to become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, candle maker or whatever. It was just enjoy life and be kind to people and do as well as you can.
Great. What were your interests and hobbies as a child?
As a child, I was very active athletically, but I also had a great love of music, which I continue today. Unfortunately, as I think I mentioned, my career in athletics did not really, I didn't excel in that, but I had a great interest in music, but I love to be active. I love to be physically active, and I still have that part of my life today, which is enjoying, particularly living in the West and living in Reno. It's having the great outdoors to be in and just experience the openness of the country and the beautiful scenery in the community that we live in.
So I'm curious, what kind of music do you love, and what kind of music?
Yeah, I started playing the guitar when I was about, I think, 10 years old. I grew up in a family that loved music, and our abilities were all over the map. Some of us were more gifted than we were. My brother, being the older of the two of us, and coming from an Italian family, ended up playing the accordion. And and I fortunately became obsessed with Elvis Presley when I saw him on television, and I just had to play the guitar. So my parents made music a priority for us, bought a guitar, took lessons for about 5 years, but I have carried a guitar with me through all of my life, and now in my retirement years, it's still a very big part of my day and week and what I do.
Fantastic. Ben's a big guitar enthusiast as well.
There you go, Ben. Great minds think alike.
Let's see here. Oh, yeah. Look up. I'm seeing you and I don't see it, and then I look right there and I see it. So
Yeah, it's
might stay back.
It looks very authentic, doesn't it?
I think it's okay. It's, but try to get it behind the ear there.
Let me take my glasses off.
Let's see. It's debonair.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So, when you were a little kid, did you have any sense of what you would do for a career as an adult?
You know, when I was little, again, being kind of in a first generation that had the opportunity to go to college, my world, basically, what I saw as the future was either becoming a doctor or a lawyer with some kind of professional role. So actually, when I went off to college, I thought I wanted to go to medical school. My undergraduate degree is in biology, has nothing to do with what my lifelong career was. So yeah, I thought I really wanted to sort of enter the medical field. And I joke, and it's not quite, let me take that over again. I joke about it, but I'm quite serious. I probably would have made a horrible doctor. I made a much better sort of head of a public television organization than I would have a doctor.
That's great. Any particular field of being a doctor?
No, I just had that sort of, one might say, naive or romantic view of being in a profession where you would help people. You know, I was fortunate that I was reasonably bright and tended toward, as many young boys did, you tended to excel in math and science in those areas. And so I was just following what seemed to be sort of one of the only career paths that I knew at that time.
Great. As you grew up, what were more of your hobbies and teenager? So, as a child, and then as you got more into your teen years, what were your hobbies then?
You know, in my teen years, I was still very much in my high school years until I went to college. Athletics consumed most of my life. I played all three sports, and that kept you very busy. And when you weren't actually, you know, playing the sports, you were running around and playing in the playground and playing basketball at the schoolyard. So that pretty much consumed most of my sort of teenage years. And then as I went off to college, as I mentioned, I think that when I went off to college, I was really consumed with academics then. I was in a pretty rigorous academic program pursuing a degree in biology. And while I played football for 2 years in college, it really wasn't anything that I really wanted to continue to do. So I committed myself to my academics and whenever I could, picking up my guitar and playing my guitar.
So in school, and Ben, if I'm jumping ahead, just hit me in the head. When you were in school, what were your favorite subjects?
When I was in college, I very much loved the biological sciences. I mean, it's what I went off to study. And still, as I moved into more of an organizational and management role, the metaphor that I continued to use as I managed organizations was very much thinking about biological organizations, how all the different pieces of a living organism tend to work together to make the whole. And that's very much the same is true in any kind of organization. I also had a real interest in psychology. And probably if I hadn't gone in the direction that I ended up going, I might have moved into the area of psychology. I mean, learning and thinking about how people react to situations, what's in their mind. Mental health and mental wellness is something that continues to be very important to me.
You kind of do that with PBS also, in its own way, your lifelong learning and things.
Just tell Megan where you went to college.
Yeah, you know, as I was graduating in my senior year, I was fairly fortunate and had a lot of opportunities. And I like to joke, you know, small liberal art colleges that had very bad football teams were interested in recruiting me because I was reasonably strong academically. I was a student leader, and I could kick a football pretty well. So I ended up actually going to Princeton University, and this was something, as I was growing up, I never even considered. I literally had no idea places like Princeton or Harvard or Yale existed. And the decision came down to being the least expensive place for me to go to school. And Princeton continues to be an extraordinary school that gives full tuitions to families that have incomes of less than $160,000. And Princeton always had the philosophy that if they admitted you, they would find a way to financially support you as you went to school. So I went to college with a job, with a loan, and with a scholarship. And it was, an experience that really did open up my eyes to a completely new world.
So what was it? First of all, what was the job when you went to Princeton?
My job at Princeton for 4 years is I worked in food services. So Princeton had a very unique situation in that the food services were run by the students. So the cooks and all that were professional, but the dining halls and staffing the dining halls and serving fellow students was all done by other students. So the hierarchy was you started out as a worker and did everything from mopping floors to bussing tables to cleaning tables to serving food. And if you stuck with it, you worked your way up to a manager role, which is I worked up in my junior year to a manager role of the dining hall. And there were 7 of us that then kind of managed the whole dining hall and the employees there.
Fantastic. Was that your first job?
Oh, no, my first job, I joke, but I think it had to be somewhere around I was 10 or 12. And I tell what was then my young nephew the story of my first job, which is true, working with Mr. Pepino. Mr. Pepino was a surveyor in Wyoming Valley, and my job when I was about 10 or 12 was to go out and hold a stick for him as he surveyed. So that was my first job. My second job, I then followed in my brother's footsteps and worked at Gina's Pizzeria. And where I grew up, there was a pizza place about every other building on the street. There was a pizza place. But Gina's Pizzeria was very popular. My brother was an extremely successful employee at Gina's Pizzeria. When he moved on to another job, I took his job. And I failed miserably because I could never push out the dough in the pan without making a hole in the middle.
Have you figured it out yet?
No, I still cannot do that, which is okay.
Okay, so what's your favorite type of pizza? What's the best way to make it?
My favorite type of pizza is your basic margherita pizza, maybe with the pepperoni and the mushroom on it, but no pineapple, no watermelon, nothing fancy, no arugula, just a good cheese, tomato pizza.
Okay. Any interesting orders you would get at that pizzeria?
Well, I was stuck in the back room at Gina's Pizzeria. I also couldn't make change. It was something very intimidating back in the day before the cash register used to figure out how to give somebody change. So they just kept me in the back room, and I ended up mostly washing dishes and pots rather than making pizza.
Especially after not being able to make that dough. If it makes you feel any better, I still can't make change without a calculator. Thank God there's calculators now. Where did you go to college? Was it a hard decision for you to choose the career path you did?
It's a very interesting story how I ended up moving from an interest in biology and academics, because I also was thinking of applying to graduate school, how I ended up in public television. And the story is that after my work in the dining halls, I would go home and we had a black and white TV in the dorm. And I used to turn on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I was just mesmerized by Fred Rogers. I thought he was unusual. I thought there was something quite unusual about Fred. This was the time when both Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood really came into being. And so I was taking a psychology course at the time, and I decided to write a paper about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I had an opportunity to write Fred a letter saying, can I come and visit you in Pittsburgh? I was in New Jersey, he was in Pittsburgh, not too far away, if I could come and visit you and him and interview him. And he wrote back and said, yes, I'd be happy for you to come and interview me, but there's a man in Princeton who's actually a producer of the show, and you could also go talk to this man. And I met a man by the name of Elliot Daly, who was one of the producers of the show, and became an absolute total convert to what Fred Rogers was trying to do, and in fact what PBS was doing at that time in building its children's service. So I immediately decided I wanted to work with an organization that was using the power of media to do good things for children. And in my 40-plus career in public television, the one constant has been is PBS is still the only place that is still doing extraordinary things for children, that treats children as real people and not as consumers. And I continue to be very, very proud of my origins in knowing Fred Rogers and working with at least the producer of the show for a couple of years, and then ending up with a career in PBS.
So what were the footsteps of that change?
Well, the kind of the transition from biology to media, I worked with the producer in Princeton for a couple of years. He had a company where he would go into schools or hospitals and create media for young children. So I worked with him for a couple of years, but then decided to pursue a graduate degree in what was then called educational media. But the concept was, and again, relatively new concept, is how can you use media in education? And so in that course at Temple University, I learned a bit about education and sort of the philosophy of education, but I also learned about film production, television production, and how media can be used to help kids. And so right out of graduate school, my wife was also in graduate school at that time getting her PhD in Philadelphia. I was very fortunate to be offered a job in San Jose, California. It was a 60-day consulting job for $65 a day. So Elizabeth and I packed up that Pinto station wagon, and drove from Philadelphia to San Jose, California for this 60-day job. And then that 60-day job blossomed into a 4-year job in San Jose, and then my move to Reno to be part of the team that built PBS Reno.
Well, what station was that? Was that KTEH?
Station, yes, the station in San Jose was KTEH. And kind of the connection there was the president of the station at KTH went to high school with the producer of Mr. Rogers that I knew at Princeton. So the producer's name is Elliot Daly. Elliot wrote a letter to his high school chum Maynard in San Jose and said, I have this kid that's interested in television and using media for kids. Can you give him a job? And Maynard Orm, who was the president at San Jose at the time, I still have his letter, wrote back and said, yeah, I'll hire you for 60 days at $65 a day and see how it works out. So
that's fantastic. So when you got to KTEH, and that now is that now part of KQED?
yeah.
Okay, how long ago was that? 10 years?
No, it's probably 20 years ago. I think it happened about around the time I went to Minnesota.
Because I'm trying to, I was in there for a very short amount of time, and it was still there, and then it was gone, and I remember it folded in. What was it a hard decision once you made that choice to change your career path, or it just made sense?
Yeah, when the fact of the matter was, when I became really, really interested in children and television, I wasn't a superstar in biology. Wouldn't have necessarily, I think, been happy or good as a physician. So I felt very fortunate to have an opportunity to sort of move into the world of public television, because really that was the only institution, as it is today, that is doing and using the power of media to do good things for kids and for communities. The job in San Jose inadvertently ended up being almost like a management training program. I ended up being what I jokingly refer to as kind of a management lackey, but I did just about everything. Anything that the general manager needed done. I wrote grant proposals. I helped establish a nonprofit foundation that would help raise money for the organization. I worked with independent producers. So inadvertently, I got a taste of every piece of the job and decided, rather than moving into the creative side of public media, I really thought I could best serve by being in a general management role, where you create an environment and a culture where creative and good people can thrive. And so that first job in San Jose prepared me very well to come to Reno to be part of the group that put the station together, because I knew a little bit about production, I knew about finance, I knew about education, I knew a little bit about a lot of things, and I could surround myself with people who would excel at kind of different specialties.
Now I have a question. Were you the youngest CEO at that point of any station?
Yeah, the group that really, the key people that put PBS Reno together included what I think are kind of the community and university people. President Joe Crawley was absolutely instrumental in supporting building KNPB. Dan Tone, who was the head of the Office of Communications and Broadcasting, was the person who hired me. But when the people who had their feet on the ground were a bunch of kids. I was 27 when I came here and started working, 30 when the station went on the air, and probably the youngest, I mean, certainly the youngest general manager in the system then. But the engineer that we worked with was 22, and this was a kid, we were all kids, but he was an absolute genius. And went on to work at the NBC Olympics in Tokyo and holds patents and all kinds of things. But he came in and helped us sort of put the station together. And you could only, I think, accomplish that kind of thing in a town like Reno at that time. It was still relatively small. And really, I think, believed in nurturing the people who were there, as opposed to looking to bring in outsiders to come in and do the work. And the support that I got from the university, from the founding board of directors, was just extraordinary as I developed as a young professional into, building a team and putting the station on the air, and then, running it for about, I don't know how many years, 17 years or something.
Great. So you kind of talked on this, but if you can talk directly to it. Earlier you spoke about your interest in Fred Rogers and that, but why were you interested in the effects that television had on children when you got into television?
Try that question again. I can go in just a direction on children's stuff, and want me to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thinking about the spark that ignited my interest in working in public television, it was what it was doing for children. And I was particularly intrigued by what Fred Rogers was doing versus what Sesame Street was doing, for example. Sesame Street was getting a lot of attention at the time, of course, for the absolutely innovative, creative work that it was doing to prepare children for school. They focused mostly on the cognitive side of what the child needed to know, learning the ABCs and the numbers. What intrigued me about Fred Rogers was tapping into the feelings and the emotions of children, which is extraordinarily difficult to do. And I learned in the research that I did on Fred Rogers that while watching him, it looked like that he was clumsy and awkward moving through his little living room and into the land of make-believe. Everything he did was absolutely deliberate, and thinking about the child and how a child would think about things, the way he talked, how he talked slowly, the way he would set up an expectation and then have a disappointment. Everything was just brilliantly conceived. And I think most people did not appreciate that kind of subtlety and nuance that Fred Rogers was bringing to that work when one compared it to how big Sesame Street was at the time.
And that, it really bridges.
I think your jacket is, yes, holding back. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
I just brought your mic up here.
Oh,
And get it.
And then Ben, if you'll, as he moved there on this side. Oops.
Here?
Yep. Just slightly.
See, if I waited till tomorrow, I would have had a haircut, but then I would have looked like I just had a haircut.
I kind of like this light. It gives that.
thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, they did scratch it. Every time they get cleaned, it's like it feels like a ice skating rink. And then when it gets scratched somewhere, I'm like, okay, I'm not
I'm
gonna.
impressed all the cracks are gone.
Can you tell Megan, do you think you had more maturity than most people? You were so young when you started here. Can you talk a little bit about that to Megan?
Yeah, people often reflect upon sort of my age and my youth and how, one was able to put together a station like this. And it was something you just didn't think of. In other words, part of the beauty of life sometimes is not knowing what you don't know, but having confidence and having really good people around you to help you through it. And so when we were building the station, we didn't know that it was really that necessarily such a big deal. It was just something you did. And we had a tremendous amount of freedom to build the station and made very deliberate decisions, which I think in the long run paid off. Decisions that are nuanced and subtle, from how big the transmitter should be versus, because if decisions on transmitter would translate into ongoing electrical costs, and the move from the university's old education building into our new facility. But yeah, I don't reflect much on sort of the youth angle of it, and I certainly wasn't any more mature than any other 27-year-old. I don't think.
You had to be. I mean, it's a lot of pressure to put on us.
But it was interesting. It wasn't. It was. You just did it, yeah. And it was, the early years. All my time at Channel 5 was absolute fun. I remember in the early days, and one couldn't get away with this today necessarily, but after every pledge drive, the staff and some of our core volunteers would, shut down the studio and roll out some wine and sit and talk until 3 in the morning, and it was wonderful camaraderie. The beginnings of the station were fueled by hundreds of volunteers. Some of my favorite memories is sitting in the control room and having community people run cameras, and one night, one volunteer, I don't know, I must have had a long day at work, but he literally started falling asleep on the camera. And as we're sitting in the control room, you could see the picture going whoop up. And then we used to hold our auction at Meadowood Mall, which is crazy to think about. But we had an extraordinary engineer at the time, Tom Warner. We would move our entire facility to the public area in Meadowood Mall. We take over 2 stores. And we would broadcast live there 7 nights a week from Meadowood Mall. People would come in, but it was all fueled by volunteers. I mean, we had a staff of, when I left here, I think we had a staff of 20 people. And so much of the work was done through volunteerism.
You made me laugh when you said you couldn't get away with it today, because I'm thinking back to Dave and I were talking about this last night with a staff member that looked at us like we were crazy because it wasn't the LED lights. And we're talking about hanging lights when they would burn through your hand.
Yes.
And it was Ben, myself, Dave, and someone else here until like 2 a.m. and everything got done, and we were sitting there with a couple lights left to do, and we're right before pledge, and we're like, yeah, we'll just share a 6-pack of beer at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, we probably shouldn't have done it back then.
No, it's again, there's another kind of funny origin story that I like to tell. So one of my strongest memories in the, leading up to building the station was putting together the grant application that provided the initial money to start buying the equipment for the station. But as things go, we were waiting to the last minute, and the proposal had to be postmarked by midnight on a certain day. And it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon of that day, and we were still working on the proposal. And we were trying to figure out how the heck do we get it postmarked. So somebody picked up, and this again is a Reno story, somebody picked up the phone and called the post office and explained that we might not be ready to bring this to the post office until 11 o'clock at night. And the man at the post office said, okay, that's okay, come around back, knock on the door, I'll take the package, I'll weigh it for you, tell you how much postage I need, then you can go around to the front of the post office and buy stamps. So literally, at about 11 o'clock at night, Elizabeth, my wife, who was typing the proposal, Dan Tone, who was working on the proposal with me, and I jumped into the car, and we knew we had to buy probably $30 or $40 worth of stamps out of the stamp machine at the post office. Where else but Reno can you get $40 worth of quarters? So we stop on the way at a casino. And we get, I don't know, $40 worth of quarters. We drive to the main post office on Vassar, go around back, knock on the door. The guy comes, weighs the package, says, you need whatever, $35 of stamps. We drive around to the front and start feeding quarters into the stamp machine. and then brought the proposal around to the back and gave it to the guy so he could postmark it by midnight.
Do you remember what casino you drove by?
It's the one, it used to be a Ramada. I'm not sure what it is now, but it was kind of, you left the university onto Evans and ran into the cashier and got quarters.
That is such a...
Yeah, it was very funny.
That is awesome. Did you feel like you were doing something at the time that was monumental and historic when you put the station here? Did you know it would become what it is?
No, I don't know how to elaborate on that, but going back to what the mindset was at the time of building the station, the group of us, I don't think had any grand vision of doing something monumental, or we just didn't have that kind of mindset or vision, if you will. We were very excited, obviously, about Reno and Northern Nevada having its very own public television station, and very excited about the potential of what we could do. But at the time and in the moment, it's like so many things, you get the work done. I was reading an article yesterday in the paper about a musician with Jethro Tull, and they were interviewing him and said, when you go out on stage, you have that thrill? And he said, no. He said, you're going out there thinking, I have to remember the words to the song. I have to remember the notes that I play. And he said something I thought was very interesting. He said, when John Glenn got into his little space cube capsule for the first time, he probably wasn't sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, this is a thrill. He was thinking, how am I going to, what button do I push? So I think that's part of the mindset when you're into these things, is you're thinking about getting the job done. But I have to say, it's very nice today, to look back and reflect upon what PBS Reno has become. And it has such a wonderful legacy of strong leadership after I left, tremendous community support, and it still is viewed as one of the very best public television stations in the system. And for a station that supports a community of this size, for the number of folks who work here, PBS Reno does extraordinary work.
And you put it on the map. did you have to figure out, and of course you did a little bit, but it's uncharted territory, trial and error. Tell us about that. What worked, what didn't?
Thinking back to the things that worked and didn't work, what worked was being very, very fortunate in hiring some really key people. And that's something that I've been blessed with all my career is, with somebody who is a general manager, you absolutely have to surround yourself by people who are smarter than you, who really know what they're doing in their specific area. And you really do become more of a conductor of an orchestra rather than a solo performer. And you just make things happen. So what worked was hiring an extraordinary engineer from the Bay Area. I mentioned the young engineer that helped put us on the air. He helped us connect with another incredible man by the name of Tom Werner, who really, really built this facility and made it work from a technology perspective. We had a very strong development person. I knew very little about fundraising. I knew a little about it, but had a very strong development person that we hired in the original team. So that's what worked. And reflecting upon what didn't work, I really can't think of very much. I mean, we had a strong board, a very strong community leader in Joanne Bradley, who was the first chair of the board. But she put together a group of people for the community who really provided kind of the credibility and the connections in the community that we needed to raise the money. So there's maybe naivete, but there's not much that I reflect upon that we could have done differently or better. I mean, things fell into place beautifully. And again, it's part of being in a community like Reno and Sparks. It's being part of a community of volunteers who care about something and can actually make a difference.
Ben, I'm going off script for a second here because I'm very curious of when you first went on the air and with Sesame Street. What did it look like? How many people were in the room? Was it just a button push? Did you? Well,
no, you have the tape of it, right? You maybe haven't seen it, but yeah, the story of the day that Channel 5 went on the air is an interesting one, and I'll backpedal a little bit on this. The first break that we got was we discovered a minor flaw in PBS's policy on how a station pays for its programming. I was talking to the folks at PBS and I said, okay, we're going to go on the air sometime this summer. And I said, well, what's it going to cost us for programming? And they said, well, we prorate it. Our year runs from October 1st through September or something. And so if you sign on 6 months into the year, you pay half of the fee, et cetera. So our total fee was going to be about $100,000. And so I thought to myself, well, what if we sign on the day before their fiscal year ends? would we pay 365th of the programming fee? And so we timed it literally for September 29th because we essentially got our programming for Channel 5 free for that entire year. Now, to make it now even sort of the drama even more dramatic, as we were approaching September 29th, if we went to October 1st, we'd have to pay 100% of the programming costs. And so it's somewhere around September 22nd, 1983, our two engineers are on the mountain and we're going to turn on our transmitter for the first time. And we're going to do this at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I told my wife Elizabeth to stand by the television set and tune in Channel 5 to see if she could see anything. There were no cell phones, of course. And so we all went up to the mountain. And while the engineers were working, they sent me down to the 7-Eleven to get coffee. And so I drove the truck down to get coffee. As I drive up the hill, the two engineers are standing outside of the transmitter building and there's smoke pouring out of the transmitter building. something happened, and the transmitter just completely blew up. And we're thinking, oh gosh, now what, right? And so fortunately, next day the engineers are on the call to Harris Corporation. Can you, FedEx another whatever tube or something out for the transmitter? And our engineers got us on the air by September 29th. But it was a fairly dramatic beginning to Channel 5.
Yeah. You eliminated my next question, which was, tell us the transmitter story, so I didn't have to ask you that directly. That's fantastic. Do you want him to elaborate any on that?
Oh, that's great. That was a great answer.
Perfect. I love that. When you did sign on, we do have the footage of it, of that very first sign on and the cutting. What did it feel like?
I recall, very well. Actually, we signed on the air September 29th, but I didn't know for sure we were going to sign on the air that day until we got the thumbs up from our chief engineer. There were still some last minute things. So we were holding back the press and holding back, because we just didn't know. And we had to sign on the air before October 1st in order to benefit from reduced programming fees from PBS. And so by the time we got into the control room, Tom Werner, our chief engineer, had the honor of pushing the button. And I just sat back and beamed. You just were proud. You looked around the room. There were a number of our board members, the founding staff that we had hired at the time. Tom Werner, who really worked incredibly hard to make this happen. And I still vividly remember pushing of the button and the Sesame Street theme song starting. And it was just a smile and a great relief that it happened. And then we had to get to work and actually run the station, which was,
That's the harder part.
Well, it's a little bit harder, but yeah, it was. It's one of those moments in life that, it's a peak experience. It was a peak experience. So I feel very fortunate that sort of being in the right place at the right time.
Fantastic. Why did you care about the work you did here?
The fundamental, what motivated me and why I cared about the work that we did here at Channel 5 and in public television, first and foremost, was built on the foundation and the belief, as I said 40 years ago and I still say today, is that television and media is the most powerful educational and inspirational tool that we have at our disposal. And it's like so many tools, it's how one chooses to use that tool. And so it was always an inspiration for me to be in an organization and associated with an institution where you had a group of people who woke up every morning and thought about how you could use the power of media to inspire lifelong learning, to get kids ready to go to school, to help children develop a strong self-esteem. So fundamentally, the core work of what we did was the ultimate foundation. But then what fueled me through, the 40 plus years I worked in public television were the people that I worked with and the people who were our donors. I don't think there were more than 20 days in 40 years that I didn't love coming to work and seeing a group of people that I worked with. And over the years, I have met and been moved by hundreds of incredibly generous and kind people who gave their financial resources and gave their time, asking very little in return because they also believed and wanted to be part of the cause of what we were doing. So that's what fueled me.
Great. Can you explain the role that you had as president here and what it entailed, your kind of day-to-day life?
In my role, I have had the opportunity to work, as I say, at both ends of the food chain in public television. So Reno PBS was one of the smallest public television stations in the country when we started. It's still among the smaller public television stations. And when I went to work at Twin Cities PBS in Minneapolis, St. Paul, it was one of the largest ones. So my life here at Channel 5 was one where you were involved in everything. I mean, I knew every purchase order that went out, every penny that was spent. I worked auction, I ran camera, I did everything. So I still had the responsibility of trying to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of where we were, to try to anticipate from a strategy point of view of how we can continue to grow and develop Reno PBS. But it was very much a family of 20, 22 people, all of whom did 3 or 4 different jobs. Quite different when I went to Twin Cities PBS. One of my first memories of going there was I looked at their budget and at their strategic plan, and realized that they had a financial problem. And so we convened our executive team of about 10 or 12 people, almost more people than worked at Channel 5. And I had written a memo saying, this is what I think and this is what I see. And the CFO picked up the spreadsheet and said, all right, I'll go work on the spreadsheet. The general manager, I was the president, there was a general manager, said, I'll work on this. Somebody said, I'll work on that. And they all left the room. And I sat there thinking, now, okay, what is it that I do? So it was a very different kind of transition. And, both absolutely invigorating and thrilling, and sort of as a growth experience were wonderful.
Fantastic. Why? Okay. Why was having a local PBS station in Reno important to this particular community?
Yeah, the concept, and one of the fundamental differences, of course, in the public media world and public television world, is that we are a federation of independently owned and operated television stations in this case. And it was fundamentally important 40 years ago, and it's even more important today, to have a local organization that has access to media and access to people's homes, now their computers, to be helping sort of shape what is relevant for their own communities. That I've done now in the past couple of years a lot of strategic planning work for the system and for other stations. And while I think that the national PBS system confronts some really interesting challenges, I think more so than ever the future of public media is with the local station. How does the local public media station redefine itself to continue to be an indispensable part of the fabric of the community? And it's not having your programs in Reno decided by a station in Las Vegas, or prior to Channel 5, Sacramento was carried here in Reno on the cable system. So the whole concept of locally owned and operated is critically important. And while at one point it existed to a certain degree in the commercial world, it doesn't even exist in the commercial world anymore. Everything is controlled by mega media empires. So public television remains one of the only media institution where you still have it being built on a bedrock of localism.
So I have a question, and I know with Joe Crowley being the president of the university, the importance of it being community rather than university licensed. To us, it means a lot to not be tied in when we see the other ones. Can you explain that just a little bit?
Yeah, one of the fundamental and I think most important decisions that was made back in the early 80s was for the university not to own and operate Channel 5 PBS Reno. And that was a very deliberate decision that was made by President Crowley and also by community leaders, is that Channel 5 ended up essentially having the best of both worlds by having a strong relationship with the university, by being associated with this great institution that's here, being on the campus, and having a group of community leaders take a sense of ownership for the station. So it is one of the best models, I think, of how a public television station can operate in a community. Sort of, some stations are owned and operated by universities. In Las Vegas, it's owned and operated by the Clark County School District. In the South, a lot of public television stations are actually owned and operated by state government. So there are different kinds of ownership models. The model that exists here in Northern Nevada, I think, is the perfect one. A community license with a strong relationship to the university, to the school system, and at the time also Truckee Meadows Community College.
Do you have any life philosophies that have guided your life?
No.
Okay. Could be the best answer I've gotten yet, so you don't have to elaborate there at all. What was it hard leaving the station, and how did you arrive at that decision?
The decision to leave Channel 5 in 1997 to go to work in the Twin Cities was a really challenging one, difficult one. We had just completed building this new facility, and it was a big deal for us. We were stuffed into the old College of Education building on the university campus. We undertook what was at that time a very ambitious fundraising campaign, a lot of work to build the building. And then I was recruited by the station in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and also by the station in Austin, Texas, to apply for a job there. And making a long story short, I was offered both jobs, and decided I didn't want to go to Texas. I didn't want to go to Austin because it wouldn't have been a big enough change for me or a big enough challenge. It was a little bit bigger than Reno, and just didn't seem like a good fit for me. So I had a week to decide whether or not I take the job in Minnesota. And I remember my wife had a conference at Lake Tahoe, so I had time to myself to think about it. And I made the decision I was going to stay. I said, I'm going to kick back. I worked hard. We built the station. We built the building. I'm going to go mountain biking, go hiking. I'm going to enjoy life because now, we're at Channel 5, we're going to coast. And I thought Elizabeth would be very happy with that decision. But I went to Lake Tahoe, and we were sitting on the deck of the place where she was having a meeting, and I told her, and she said, well, that seems like maybe a short-sighted decision. Why don't you ask them for another week? And so I called them up, and I said, I need another week. And I guess what motivated me was, I believe in a couple of things. One is, I knew I needed to be challenged more. I wanted to grow more. And the other thing that I think is extremely healthy is that there is a change of leadership in organizations. That having, if I were here for 40 years, it wouldn't have been a good thing. Organizations need to refresh, need to have fresh ideas, new energy come in. And I think it's proven to be a good decision because all of my successors and the work that Kurt is doing is very different than the work I probably would have ended up doing had I stayed here.
All right. Why was getting a new facility for KNPB so important?
Yeah, we after having signed on the air in 1983, we quickly just grew out of space. We were growing as any new organization would. The university was extremely generous in giving us space in what is now the old College of Education building, but we were literally just bursting at the seams, and we had to build a new facility. So we undertook a very, very comprehensive study as to where we would build this building. We looked at sites in the community, at the community college, and ultimately decided to stay at the university. But the basic concept was, we needed to have a room of our own, a building of our own, and also have enough space at our facility to bring more community members in. So one of the key decisions we made was to have kind of an open feeling to the building, and also to build a community space, a space where other organizations can come and have meetings. And I think that's proven to be something that's been very positive for Channel 5 over the years. That I've always thought that television is a very passive one-way medium. And in order for a local public television station really to be part of a community, you need to bring people in as well as just passively sending television programming or content to them. So the new building was just about, again, a rebirth after how many ever years of our first phase of growth.
Great. You had quite an effect on the employees who remained after you left. People would and still talk fondly about you. Tell us what that means to you.
You know, the fact that, you know, people that I have worked with at Channel 5 still have very fond memories and have very fond memories of our working together means a great deal to me. I mean, we're an extremely tight group of people. You know, none of us being perfect, supported each other, and fundamentally, we had fun most of the time. I mean, work was fun, and particularly the founding staff was part of something quite unique in anybody's professional experience. You know, having the opportunity to be at the beginning of something and being at the founding of something is a pretty special experience. So it's understandable why kind of the founding staff and the people who were there from the beginning feel a very strong sense of camaraderie and sort of belonging together.
So I want to ask you a little bit of a crazy question here.
I just want to say I pity Ben having to edit this.
Oh, no,
Oh,
this is all good
these
stuff.
are all his
I love
questions.
Okay.
And he's probably going to hit me because a couple of them I elaborate on just because I have looked at all the photos that Ben's been going through, and in each guide that we're doing now has background photos, and over the years and having used things, there are 3 photos that none of us can figure out with you. One is the KNPB puppet letters on Pledge. Can you talk about that? Sorry, I just have to ask.
I wish I could
the
remember
story.
the names of the
Everybody always asks me, and I'm like, I don't know.
You don't have any tape of them, do you?
I think we might.
You know, I have. Well, I will never share with you, Ben.
Oh, if
The
you
tapes
have
that I
it.
have, we did among the crazy things that we did after Pledge. We did mock Pledge breaks.
Oh, I do have one,
You do? Okay. Anyway,
but we'll get them if not.
one of the many memories that just makes me smile is thinking about 2 people in this community who I am sorry, whose names I just cannot recall at the moment, who created the KNPB puppets. So during pledge drives, these 2 puppeteers would come to the station and get behind the phone banks and do a whole puppet act with the KNPB puppets, and the P would always go, and I'm the P for Pagliarini, right? And it was absolutely hysterical. So the KNPB puppets were a big part of sort of our pledge activities. And the other memory I have too is that for one pledge period, we decided to bring live animals onto the set and had like a baby cougar or something. And I don't know why we did this, but we thought it would, of course, inspire people to give, I'm sure. But it was just fun. I just remember being like scratched and bitten by the cougar in the middle of a live pledge break and having to carry on and ask people to send their money. And
I have a question for you. Do you have that footage anywhere?
the cougar?
Yeah.
No.
We have photos of. The only reason I ask, Dave got scratched by a little cat during a live pledge break just about 3 or 4 years ago. So
Yeah, it's
if
a
we had the
tradition.
footage, the contrast of the cougar to that.
So the other unusual pledge, now you're bringing back pledge memories, a very unusual thing that we did, one pledge, classic Northern Nevada Reno, again, only could do this in Nevada, was the owners of the Calneva wanted to make a contribution, and we decided we wanted to do something a bit dramatic. So they loaned us a big Bertha slot machine, giant slot machine. And I think it went something like if people pledged, I don't know, over $50 or something, we got to pool Big Bertha. And they had programmed, they wanted to give us like $5,000 or $7,000 or $10,000. And we estimated how many pledges we were going to get over $50. And they programmed the slot machine so that we would roughly end up getting $10,000 with them on the slot machine pool. So we had this giant slot machine in the studio for weeks, and people would call in and we'd come and we'd pledge it, and if these things lined up, it meant another $100 from the CalNeva. That was actually pretty kind of fun.
That's actually a really cool idea to try to reinvent. We'll throw that past development, see if they can get that Big Bertha back in here.
Big Bertha.
Oh, that's great. Tell us about how dedicated the employees were when you worked here.
I'm trying to figure out how to lead into it. You know, when I reflect upon the, team of people who were here from the beginning, they were an incredibly group of committed and hardworking folks. Literally nobody worried about time clocks. During pledge periods, again, staff of 20 people, you would work until 11 to 12 o'clock at night. Employees would come in the next day and get their job done. So it was just a very different kind of level of expectation and experience that some organizations have. Is that you were just part of a group of people who were feeling like they were doing good work and but also having fun doing it. But it was those pledge drives, as even now today, I'm sure for the staff here. We used to do many more pledge days than you're doing now, but for 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks, you would be working 7 days a week. During auctions, you would getting home at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and then people would have to come, and the program manager would have to worry about making sure that the logs were done, and the traffic person would. But everybody just contributed. It was just a very, very special time.
Definitely. And I can tell you, having come not too long after you left, because I came in when Rick was here.
Okay.
And then Ben just shortly thereafter me, coming in and having a set where we had, hundreds of volunteers and 7-hour auctions in here. And
Crazy.
it was crazy as compared to we do an auction now, it's not as many, and I'm like, those were the kind of the times, because as much work as it was just fun.
Yeah, you had during our public television went through a phase when live auctions were a part of what just about every station did, and then over time people realized that if you put a sharp pencil to doing an auction, it probably really wasn't that smart to do from a financial perspective. What the auction did for PBS Reno and did in Minnesota was it engaged literally hundreds of volunteers, and it provided a vehicle for small business in this community to contribute. So as part of the auction, people would donate all kinds of items from small businesses all over the northern Nevada. So it was a really interesting concept, and it's kind of sad that it has gone away, but I certainly understand why it has gone away. Talking about sort of lots of memories of reflecting back on the 40 years. During auctions, O'Brien's Moving and Storage, a company, I think it's Biken's moving company in town, he donated his staff for 7 nights. Movers came and moved items off the set and on the set. So those, mostly guys, would be coming and working auctions during the evening and then doing their regular moving job during the day. But just another example of how so many people made a difference and continue to make a difference of strengthening this organization.
That's great. Why did you move back? Oh, sorry, man.
I was gonna quickly change the battery in this. You need anything to drink, or are you okay?
I'm good.
3 more quick questions.
I'm good.
Thank you for your patience.
Oh yeah, no, that's it's actually, as you can imagine, it's fun talking about the engineer that I alluded to, the guy that was 22, just died just this week. He was I'm 70, he was 65 or something like that. He died of cancer.
Oh no.
But he was just unbelievable. As was Tom. You knew Tom, right?
I did. I knew Tom. He left a little bit after I got here, but Andy was here, and Andy's wife, and I can assuming, right? I'm trying to remember.
I mean,
So his son and daughter-in-law
yeah.
were here working master and control.
Oh, okay.
And actually,
I got you, right, okay.
Andy, the son,
Yeah.
trained me in master control,
Oh, yeah.
which was my very first job here. So, yeah.
I thought of something and I completely forgot it, so it couldn't have been that important.
What's the first local production that we did here? Do you know?
No. We started right away doing election coverage, right? So we did election debates. Then we did Silver State, which was a weekly kind of public affairs show that the dean of the journalism school hosted, who was Travis Lynn, who was just excellent, right? So those are the first. But then the first major documentary series we did was the Nevada Experience.
And those were with Rosemary McCarthy.
Kurt Daniels, I mean, Rosemary was there, but Kurt Daniels was then the head of local production. Yeah.
Great. What drew you back here?
So a lot of folks, some folks, let me start again. Some folks are surprised